The report came through on a Tuesday. Sarah Okafor was in the middle of reviewing trade schedules when the notification landed on her desk screen. Clean, official, stamped with the seal of the Galactic Nutrition Council. She read it once. Then she read it again. Then she leaned back in her chair and stared at the ceiling for a long moment. The Council was sending a delegation to Earth, not to celebrate, not to exchange ideas. They were coming to formally assess whether human food was fit for interspecies programs, and based on the preliminary summary attached to the notification, they had already made up their minds. The document used phrases like thermally unstable compounds, chaotic preparation methods, and nutritionally inconsistent outputs. It described human cuisine the way someone might describe a broken machine, something to be corrected, not appreciated. At the very bottom, in careful bureaucratic language, it suggested that Earth's food culture might need to be replaced by Council standard nutrient protocols before any serious exchange program could begin. Sarah set the notification down and made 2 calls. The first was to Port Meridian, the orbital station where the delegation would dock. The second was to San Antonio. Ray Montoya picked up on the 3rd ring. She could hear pots in the background and someone laughing in the kitchen behind him. She told him what was coming. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, there was a short pause. "How many of them?" he asked. 2 primary delegates, Counselor Vren and his assistant, species called Talori. "What do they eat?" "Synthesized nutrient blocks. They consider it the most advanced dietary system in the known galaxy." Another pause. Then Ray said, "Okay, just that. Okay." Like someone had told him it might rain on the weekend. Sarah almost smiled. The Talori ship was smaller than expected. It docked at Port Meridian's upper ring with quiet precision, and the 2 figures that stepped out onto the arrival platform were tall, nearly 2 meters each, with pale skin that carried a faint inner glow like light pressing through paper. Their eyes were large and calm, built for reading data rather than emotion. Counselor Vren led the way. He wore the deep blue uniform of the Galactic Nutrition Council and carried a datapad that he was already consulting before he had fully crossed the threshold. His assistant Doss followed 2 steps behind, younger, slightly less rigid in the shoulders, his glow a warmer color than his superiors. Sarah met them at the platform entrance. She was alone, no ceremony, no crowd. The Council had specifically requested an informal arrival. "Liaison Okafor," Vren said. His translator rendered his voice in flat, careful syllables. "We appreciate the efficient reception." "Welcome to Earth's orbital station," she said. "I hope the journey was comfortable." The journey was adequate. He looked around the docking corridor with mild assessment. "We would like to begin the evaluation process as soon as possible. Our preliminary data is quite thorough. I expect the formal report will not take long." "Of course." Sarah kept her voice neutral. "Before the report is finalized, I'd like to request one thing." Vren looked at her. "A request. A live demonstration, before any official findings are submitted." She met his large eyes steadily. "The data your council compiled was gathered remotely. I think it's only fair that you observe human food preparation in person before drawing conclusions." Vren considered this. He consulted his datapad briefly, as if checking whether fairness was somewhere in his schedule. "Our remote analysis is comprehensive," he said. "I'm sure it is. But your protocols also require observational confirmation before a formal ruling, don't they?" He paused. Doss glanced sideways at his superior with an expression that might have been curiosity. "That is accurate," Vren said slowly. "Then 48 hours. That's all I'm asking. Let us show you what we actually do before you tell us to stop doing it." Another pause. Vren looked at his datapad, looked at Sarah, then made a small notation with 2 fingers. 48 hours, he agreed. "It will not change the fundamental findings." "We'll see," Sarah said simply. That evening she sent a message to Ray. It said, "They're here. 48 hours. Bring everything." Ray's reply came back in under a minute. It said, "Already prepping the salsa." Sarah stood at the wide window of her station office and looked down at the curve of earth below, brown and green and blue, enormous and ordinary. Somewhere down there a kitchen was already awake, already warm, already full of smells that no datapad could measure. The Talori had built their science on numbers. That was fine. Humans had built their food on something numbers had never quite managed to catch. 48 hours was more than enough. The smell hit them before the door opened. Vren stopped walking. It was a small, involuntary pause, the kind a body makes when something unexpected reaches it before the mind can prepare a response. His environmental suit was filtering the air, reducing outside compounds to safe, measurable levels, and still something was coming through. Something warm. Something that had no entry in his reference library. He noted it on his datapad without comment, and kept walking. Ray Montoya's restaurant sat on a quiet street in San Antonio, wedged between a tire repair shop and a clothing store with hand-painted signs. It was not large. The outside walls were painted the color of dried clay, and a wooden sign above the door read the name in faded letters. A string of small lights framed the window. Nothing about it suggested scientific significance. Vren documented all of this. Inside, the space was warm and low-ceilinged. Round tables with mismatched chairs filled most of the floor. Photographs covered one wall, families, old women stirring pots, children with sauce on their chins. The kitchen was open at the back, separated from the dining area by a short counter, and that was where the smell was coming from in full force. Ray stood behind the counter. He was a broad man in his late 40s, wearing a plain apron with flour on the front. He did not approach them formally. He just looked up when they came in, nodded once, and turned back to the dough he was pressing between his palms. "Counselor," Sarah said from beside Vren. "This is Ray Montoya. He'll be preparing today's demonstration." Vren surveyed the space. "This is the facility. This is the restaurant, yes. There is no controlled environment, no sterile preparation surface. The temperature regulation appears informal." He made a note. "The preparation individual is not wearing protective equipment beyond a basic textile covering." Ray glanced up at that. He did not seem bothered. "You want gloves? I've got gloves. You want a clean coat? I can find one. But the food's going to taste the same either way." Vren looked at him. "Taste is a subjective variable." "Sure," Ray said. "So is breathing. Doesn't make it less real." Doss made a soft sound. It might have been the beginning of a laugh. He suppressed it quickly. Vren returned to his datapad. Sarah took a seat at the counter, and after a moment of visible calculation, Doss did the same. Vren remained standing, documenting. Ray worked without explaining himself. He pressed tortillas by hand, each one slightly different in shape from the last, and laid them on a dry iron pan where they puffed and blistered and darkened at the edges. He pulled a pot of braised beef from the back. It had been cooking since early morning, and the smell that came off it when he lifted the lid moved through the room like a warm front. Doss turned his head toward it immediately. His inner glow shifted almost imperceptibly, from its usual cool blue to something closer to amber. He did not seem to notice he had done it. The salsa verde was made fresh at the counter. Ray charred the tomatillos in a dry pan until the skins blackened, then blended them with garlic and a handful of cilantro. The pickled onions were already waiting in a small jar. Vivid pink, sharp-smelling, made the night before. Charred corn went into a small bowl beside them. All of it was assembled without a single measurement. "You have no precise quantities," Vren observed. "I have experience," Ray said. "Experience is not a standardized unit." Ray put down the spoon he was holding and looked at Vren directly for the first time. Not with irritation. With something quieter than that. "My grandmother made this recipe without writing a single thing down," he said. "She learned it from her mother, who learned it from hers. Every woman in my family made it slightly different, and it was always right. You want to tell me that's not a system?" Vren opened his mouth, closed it, made a note. The first taco was assembled in about 40 seconds. Warm tortilla, braised beef, a spoon of salsa verde, a few rings of pickled onion, a pinch of charred corn. Ray slid it across the counter. He placed it in front of Doss. By Telori protocol, the junior member of a delegation was always the one to engage with unknown variables first. Vren had already begun documenting the reasoning: junior exposure, controlled observation, senior analysis to follow. Doss looked at the taco. It was not large. It did not glow or move or produce any observable data signal. It was simply food, folded, slightly imperfect, still warm. He looked up at Ray. Ray just nodded. Doss picked it up. Nobody spoke. Doss held the taco with both hands, the way someone holds something they are not yet sure how to classify. His bioluminescent skin was still its usual calm blue. His eyes moved from the food to Ray, then back to the food. He bit into it. The first thing that happened was the sound, the soft crunch of the tortilla edge, the pull of the braised beef. Then the smell reached him again, closer now, coming from inside the food itself. The garlic in the salsa, the smoke in the corn, the clean, sharp acid of the pickled onion cutting through the fat of the meat. Doss went very still. His skin changed color. It was not a dramatic shift, not a flash or a sudden wave. It was slow, like sunrise, moving from blue to amber to something warmer, something without a clean name. His secondary sensory receptors, the ones the Telori used primarily for toxin detection, were firing in a cascade that had nothing to do with danger. They were just responding, fully, to everything at once. He took a second bite before the first one was finished. Vren looked up from his datapad. "Doss," he said, "bioscan protocol." Doss did not answer immediately. He finished chewing. Then he looked at Vren with an expression that was difficult to read. Not defiance, not confusion, but something close to the look a person gets when they realize they have been missing something for a long time without knowing it. "I'm fine," Doss said quietly. "That is not for you to determine. Bioscan. Now." Doss set the taco down, carefully like he intended to return to it, and pressed 2 fingers to the sensor panel on his forearm. The device ran its check and produced a soft tone. Vren crossed the counter space in 3 steps and looked at the readings. Sarah watched him. She had expected Vren to find something alarming in the data, something he could use to shut the whole thing down, write it into the report as a health concern, move on. She had braced for it. Instead, Vren stood very still. The bioscan showed no toxins, no harmful compounds, no inflammatory markers, no stress signals. What it showed instead was activation, a full-spectrum receptor response across Doss's sensory system that the scan's comparison library had to flag as unusual simply because it had never recorded anything like it. Every sensory pathway had been engaged simultaneously. The readout looked less like exposure to food and more like a system that had just been switched on. Vren stared at the numbers. He was a scientist first. Whatever his opinions were, he had spent his career refusing to argue with his own instruments. He looked at the taco sitting on the counter. Then he looked at Ray. Ray had not said a word. He was leaning against the back counter with his arms folded, watching Vren with the calm patience of someone who has already seen this moment happen before, in smaller ways, with his own family, with every new person who sat down at this counter for the first time. "It's just a taco," Ray said. "The bioscan results are inconsistent with anything in our nutritional database," Vren said. "Yeah." Ray reached across and picked up the second taco he had already assembled. He held it out toward Vren. "That's because it's not in your database." A long pause. Doss picked his taco back up. Vren looked at the one being offered to him. He looked at it the way he looked at data he did not want to accept, searching for the flaw, the error, the variable that would let him set it aside and return to his existing conclusions. He did not find one. He took the taco. He ate it standing up, still in his blue council uniform, still with his datapad in his other hand. He ate it in 3 careful, deliberate bites, each one followed by a pause in which he was clearly running his own internal analysis. His skin shifted color only slightly, less than Doss had, more controlled, but it shifted. A faint warmth moved through the pale bioluminescence along his neck. He set the datapad down on the counter. It was a small action. He probably did not even notice he had done it. Sarah noticed. Vren stood there for a moment with nothing in his hands, which was possibly the first time that had happened since he arrived on Earth. He was quiet in a way that was different from his earlier quiet. Not calculating, not documenting, just present. Then he cleared his throat. "I will need," he said carefully, "a full chemical and biological breakdown of what was just consumed." "I can help with that," Sarah said. She already had her phone out. "And I will need," Vren continued, with slightly less certainty in his voice, "another one of those." Ray smiled. He was already reaching for the next tortilla. Dr. Paul Adeyemi arrived with 2 bags, one full of reference materials, one full of snacks for himself, because he believed in being prepared. He was a nutritional biochemist from Lagos, currently working with Earth's Interspecies Exchange Office, and he had the specific energy of someone who had spent decades waiting for exactly this conversation. He sat up at one of Ray's tables with a portable display unit and a posture that suggested he was about to enjoy himself. Vren had requested the breakdown. Vren was going to get it. "Let's start with the tortilla," Paul said, pulling up a molecular diagram. Corn, ground, soaked in calcium hydroxide solution, a process called nixtamalization. Humans figured this out roughly 3,000 years ago in Mesoamerica. Vren leaned forward. The purpose of this process? It breaks down the outer layer of the corn kernel and releases nutrients that are otherwise locked inside. Specifically, it makes niacin, vitamin B3, bioavailable. Populations that skipped this step and ate plain corn developed deficiency diseases. Populations that did it thrived. Paul tapped the diagram. They didn't know the chemistry. They just knew it worked. They observed, they tested, they passed it down. Applied science without a laboratory. Vren was quiet. He was writing again, but differently now. Faster, like he was trying to keep up. "The beef," Paul continued, "braised low and slow for several hours. You know what happens to collagen and connective tissue under sustained heat? It converts to gelatin. That's what gives the meat that texture, that pull. It also creates compounds called glutamates. Glutamates trigger the umami receptor," Doss said from across the table. Paul pointed at him. "Exactly. The 5th taste. Not sweet, not sour, not salty, not bitter. Umami, a deep, savory signal that your brain interprets as protein-rich, nutritionally complete, safe to eat in quantity. It's an ancient biological signal. Humans have it. Apparently the Talori have something similar." Vren looked at Doss. Doss looked at his hands. "The salsa verde," Paul said. "Charred tomatillos. The charring is not accidental. Applying dry heat to the surface of the fruit triggers the Maillard reaction. Amino acids and sugars interact under heat to produce hundreds of new compounds. Those compounds are the flavor, the brown, the smoke, the depth. You cannot get those from raw ingredients. You can only get them from fire." "Humans cook with fire," Vren said. It sounded almost like a realization rather than a fact he had already known. "Humans have been cooking with fire for at least 1,000,000 years, Paul said. Some researchers believe it's the reason we developed the brain size we have. Cooking made food easier to digest, which freed up energy for neurological development. You could argue that human intelligence is, in part, a product of cooking." The table was quiet for a moment. Vren set his datapad flat. "Your preliminary assessment classified human cuisine as thermally unstable." "I saw that document," Paul said pleasantly. "It was wrong. What you called instability is controlled transformation. Every step of what Ray did this morning has a function. The temperature, the timing, the order of the ingredients. None of it is random. It just looks random if you've never watched someone who knows what they're doing." Ray was at the far counter, pressing more tortillas. He had not joined the scientific discussion. He did not need to. "The pickled onions," Paul continued. "Acid, acetic acid from the vinegar, serves 2 purposes, preservation and contrast. The fat of the meat, the brightness of the acid. Your palate doesn't just experience one thing at a time. It experiences the relationship between things. Human cuisine is built on contrast. Sweet against salty, fat against acid, heat against cool, The brain finds the balance between opposites more satisfying than any single note. Doss had been quiet for most of this. Now he spoke. Our nutrient blocks deliver every required compound in a single intake, he said. No contrast, no relationship between components. Just complete nutrition in the most direct form. Yes, Paul said, not unkindly. And how does it taste? Doss did not answer. We don't consider taste a meaningful variable, Vren said. But he said it slightly more slowly than he might have 2 hours earlier. Paul leaned back. Here's the thing, counselor. Your body considered it a meaningful variable this morning. That bioscan didn't lie. Your sensory system responded to this food in ways it has apparently never responded to anything before. You can decide that's irrelevant. But your own biology disagrees with you. Vren looked at the molecular diagram still floating on the display. Then he looked at Ray's kitchen, the old iron pan, the worn cutting board, the small jar of pink onions, the pot of meat that had been going since before sunrise. 10,000 years, he said finally. Not a question, just thinking out loud. Give or take, Paul said. Vren picked up his datapad. He stared at it for a long moment. Then he placed it face down on the table, which was, Sarah noted, the second time today he had put it down. Continue, he said. By the time the churros came out, the restaurant had gone dark outside. Ray had turned the closed sign on hours ago, without anyone asking him to. The formal structure of the visit had quietly dissolved somewhere between the third taco and Paul's explanation of the Maillard reaction. Vren's environmental suit was still on, but he had stopped consulting his datapad with the same frequency. Doss had pushed his chair closer to the kitchen counter and was watching Ray work with undisguised interest. The churros were simple. Fried dough, dusted with cinnamon sugar, served with a small bowl of dark chocolate sauce. Ray placed them at the center of the table and sat down for the first time all day. The moment he sat, something shifted. The dynamic of the space changed. It stopped being a demonstration and became something else. A table. People at the end of a long day. Doss picked up a churro. He did not wait for Vren's clearance this time. He bit into it. The sugar and cinnamon hit first, then the chocolate. His glow moved through 3 colors in 4 seconds. Paul watched him with delight. Vren watched him with something more complicated. You said something earlier, Doss said to Ray. About your grandmother. Ray refilled his own coffee. What about her? You said she made this recipe without writing anything down, that her mother taught her. Doss turned the churro in his hands. How many people taught each other before it became what you serve today? Ray thought about it. I don't know. Generations. My grandmother learned in a kitchen in Oaxaca. Before that, I couldn't tell you the names. I just know the food didn't start with her. And it carries something from all of them. Yeah, Ray said simply. It does. Doss looked at Vren. Vren was looking at the churro in front of him. He had not yet touched it. Sarah had been watching Vren for most of the evening. She had seen the exact moment the bioscan broke something in his certainty. She had seen him fight to rebuild it through Paul's explanations, trying to reorganize what he was experiencing into a framework that still fit his existing model. She had watched that effort get harder and harder as the hours passed. Now she decided to say the thing she had been holding since the delegation arrived. Counselor, she said, can I ask what question your council came here to answer? Vren looked at her. Whether human food is viable for interspecies exchange programs? Right. But that's a logistics question. She folded her hands on the table. What you've been watching today isn't logistics. Ray didn't spend 30 years learning to cook so that other species could adopt the caloric data. He did it because when someone sits down at this table and eats something he made, something happens. A memory gets passed. A connection gets made. People feel... She paused, choosing the word carefully. Received. The table was quiet. Received, Vren repeated. Like they matter. Like someone put time and care into something for them specifically. Sarah looked at the photographs on the wall. The women with the pots, the children with the messy faces. Human food has never just been about nutrition. Not once in our entire history. It's always been about the person you made it for. Doss was very still. Vren looked at the photographs for a long time. He was running his own kind of analysis, Sarah could tell, but a different kind than the one he had arrived with, not searching for errors, just processing. Our nutrient blocks are complete, he said at last. They contain everything a body requires. I believe you, Sarah said. Then what are we missing? He asked it genuinely, not defensively. The way someone asks a question when they already suspect the answer but need to hear it said out loud. Sarah looked at Ray. Ray poured the chocolate sauce over a churro and pushed it across to Vren. You're missing the part that makes eating worth doing, Ray said. The part where it's not just fuel, where someone cared enough to make it good. Vren looked at the churro. He picked it up. He ate it slowly, the way he had eaten the first taco, carefully, deliberately. This time he didn't scan it afterward. He just sat there. After a long, quiet moment, he looked at Ray and said something that Sarah had not predicted, and Paul would later describe as the most significant sentence spoken during the entire 48-hour visit. He said, "Will you show me how the tortillas are made?" Ray looked at him. Then he stood up, walked to the far counter, and came back with a ball of masa dough. He set it on the table between them. Put your hands like this, Ray said. Vren pressed the dough between his palms. It was imperfect, uneven at the edges. His glow was a very quiet gold. He did not take a single note. 6 weeks later, Vren stood before the full Galactic Nutrition Council. The chamber was large, formal, and cold in the way that all official Talori spaces were cold. Clean lines, filtered air, no smell of anything. 32 senior counselors sat in a tiered arc facing the presentation floor. They had gathered expecting a routine submission. The preliminary data had been filed before the Earth visit. The dismissal had practically written itself. Vren stood at the center of the floor and said nothing for a moment. Behind him on the display wall, the title of his report appeared in council standard text. Then the subtitle. One of the senior counselors leaned forward to read it and visibly paused. The report was not what they had sent him to write. Vren began. He went through the data methodically. The bioscan results from Doss's first exposure, the chemical breakdown from Paul's analysis, the Maillard reaction compounds, the glutamate cascade, the historical record of nixtamalization, 3,000 years of applied nutritional science without a single formal laboratory. He put every number on the screen and walked through it without editorializing, without personal language, without any of the context from Ray's restaurant or the photographs on the wall, or the table where someone had pressed dough between their palms for the first time. The numbers alone were enough to create unease in the chamber. Senior Counselor Brath spoke first. She was the eldest member of the panel and had sat on the council for 40 years. Her tone was carefully composed. Counselor Vren, your preliminary report clearly indicated that human food was inconsistent with interspecies safety standards. This submission appears to contradict that finding. The preliminary report was compiled from remote data, Vren said. It did not include observational confirmation. Council protocol requires observational confirmation before a formal ruling. I followed protocol. And your conclusion? Vren pressed 2 fingers to the display panel. A new document replaced the data charts. His formal assessment, full classification, submitted in the standard council format. Human cuisine, it said, is to be reclassified from nutritionally inconsistent to sensory complex beyond current council modeling standards. Earth is recommended as the foundational study site for a full cross-species culinary exchange program. The chamber erupted, not loudly. The Talori were not a loud species, but in the controlled, pointed way that a formal council erupts. Multiple voices requesting the floor, rapid hand signals for procedural objection. The senior counselors exchanging looks with enough weight to bend light. Brath raised one hand and restored quiet. This recommendation is unprecedented, she said. On what basis does a nutrition assessment produce a recommendation for a cultural exchange program? On the basis that the two cannot be separated, Vren said. He pulled up the bioscan one more time. This is the biological response recorded from Doss upon first contact with human food. Every receptor pathway, full activation. Nothing in our existing data, including 30 years of nutrient block studies, has produced a comparable result in any Telori subject. He let the chamber read the scan in silence. I do not recommend this program because I found the experience pleasant, he continued. I recommend it because the data demands it. Human food produces biological responses our current science cannot fully model. That means our current science is incomplete. As a council, we have two choices. We can ignore data that does not fit our models, which is not science. Or we can investigate. Brath looked at the bioscan for a long time. And your personal assessment, counselor? She asked. Off the record. A pause. Off the record, Vren said. I would like to know what tamales taste like. There was silence in the chamber. Then Doss, sitting in the junior observer seat near the back wall, made a small sound that might have been a laugh. He turned it into a cough. Badly. The notification reached Sarah 3 hours later. She was back at her station desk, watching the same orbital curve of Earth she had watched 6 weeks ago. She read the Council's preliminary agreement. She read the words, Foundational Study Site. She read the words, Exchange Program Approved Pending Further Review. She forwarded it to Ray. His reply came in under a minute again. It said, I knew. Also, Doss already messaged me asking for the tortilla recipe. Sarah put down her phone. She looked out at Earth, enormous, patient, covered in 10,000 years of fire and flavor, and every meal ever made for someone who mattered. Some arguments, she thought, do not need speeches. Some arguments just need to be fed.